Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 792 for the 10th of December, 2023. Richard Saunders coming to you from a sauna, otherwise known as Sydney, Australia. Yesterday afternoon, it reached about 108, 109 Fahrenheit, 41 to 43 Celsius. What a warm one it was. And even this morning, I got up very early, at 4 o'clock, in fact. I was giving an origami lesson, an online origami lesson for the wonderful people at Paper Tree Origami Store in San Francisco. But with the time differences, I had to get up early. And it was still stinking hot at 4 o'clock in the morning. What's going on? Well, what's going on with this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone podcast? A bit of a sad start, I must say. An old friend of mine, Dr Alex Ritchie, a very famous paleontologist, died just the other week. He will be greatly missed. He was a really, really nice, easy-going gentleman who discovered many, many interesting fossils in his career. We'll be paying tribute to Dr. Alex Ritchie. And I first really got to know Alex because he was a staunch supporter of science against creationism in the days when the creationist lobby actually were trying to change the education system here in Australia. And thankfully now they've largely been forgotten to time. Anyway, we're going to look briefly at the career of Dr. Alex Ritchie. After that, we have the next part of the skeptical discussion. Fraser Cain, Brian Dunning, and myself talking about skeptical issues, including this week about skepticism or the skeptical movement itself and artificial intelligence. Then it's Maynard's spooky action. Maynard went to Skeptics in the pub just a few days ago, where our guest speakers were Susan Gerbic, the famous Susan Gerbic, and Melanie Trecek-King. Interviews with those wonderful people coming up in coming weeks on the Skeptic Zone. Maynard did a lot of interviews. But this week, Maynard will ask the pub goers, have you ever seen a UFO? Because UFOs are sort of in the news at the moment. Well, with the Australian Skeptics anyway, because we awarded the Bent Spoon to Ross Coulthard, a prominent UFO supporter. Do you support UFOs? That's an interesting question. He's of the opinion, although it seems, that governments are covering up the truth about aliens. Oh dear. After that, speaking of Melanie Trecek-King, Melanie interviews me. She interviewed me for her online, I think it was for TikTok or YouTube or something like that, but I've got that interview to play for you. So the tables are turned a little bit and somebody gets to interview me for a little while. Then to round off the episode, in the Trove archive section, we're going to be looking at some of the references to the late Dr. Alex Ritchie and some of the things he did when he was fighting the creationists some decades ago. Now, just recently, and speaking of my origami lesson earlier today, I did for the good people at the Paper Tree Origami Store in San Francisco, I have revamped the folding instructions for the flying pig. Pegasus, the flying pig I invented for James Randi. If you go to skepticzone.tv, scroll to near the bottom of the page, you'll be able to see a video I made in 2007 showing you how to make the flying pig, and you can download the folding instructions. So if you want to fill your house with paper flying pigs, go for it. Also, if you go to my TikTok channel, and again, just go to skepticzone.tv, at the top of the page there's a TikTok link. I've uploaded some folding instructions for other bits of origami, if you're into that sort of thing. I hope you're keeping cool around Australia with this ridiculous heat. Some people I know have gone to wonderful parties, 60-themed parties. Ooh, that would have been fun. I'm a 60s-themed sort of guy, whatever that means. Mid-60s. Wouldn't it be interesting to go back in a time machine and visit the mid-60s? I have a niece who's 14, and I asked her a couple of weeks ago, I said, if you could go back in time, where would you like to go? What year? And she thought about it and she said she'd like to go back to the 1990s because she'd be interested to see how people got on without smartphones and early computers and things like that. I thought that was quite funny. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, open the freezer, fill up a glass full of ice cubes, some nice bubbly soda water. And while I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm very sad to hear of the passing of Dr. Alex Ritchie, the famed paleontologist, and I thought I would read this item as published in the Canoundra Phoenix on the 22nd of November 2023. Vale, Dr. Alex Ritchie. It is with profound sadness that we report the passing of renowned paleontologist Dr. Alex Ritchie, Research Fellow, Australian Museum, and Emeritus Faculty, Australian National University. In 1955, roadworks near Canoundra uncovered a large rock slab covered with unusual impressions, which was then placed to the side of the road whilst roadworks continued. A local apiarist later found this slab and, believing it to contain fossils, contacted the Australian Museum about it. In 1993, paleontologist Dr. Alex Ritchie led a dig at the site of the initial fossil discovery. That dig led to the removal of 70 tons of rock slab and revealed over 3,000 fish fossils from the Devonian period. The dig site has now led to several new discoveries and tells the story of events that occurred over 360 million years ago. Thanks to Dr. Ritchie's persistence, the Canoundra Age of Fossils Museum is one of the only 2 fish fossil museums in the world and is a national heritage site due to its international scientific significance. Dr. Ritchie's commitment, passion, and lifelong enthusiasm for the Canoundra fish fossils was unrivaled, and his contribution to the world of paleontology in general was enormous. Thank you, Dr. Ritchie. You will be very much missed. I first met Dr. Alex Ritchie in about the year 2000, I think, at the Skeptics Christmas party in a Chinese restaurant. And I was sitting next to Alex and we hit it off straight away. And I think we consumed about 3 bottles of wine between us. So we had a very nice evening. Alex was very kind. He invited some skeptics up to Canoundra some years ago to do a little fossil hunt for ourselves, and I was very lucky to find 2 or 3 examples of a trilobite. That was very exciting to tap open a piece of rock slab and reveal something that hasn't been seen since long before the age of the dinosaurs. And as we'll get to later on in the Trove segment, Alex Ritchie in skeptical circles was well known as a prominent defender of science against the pseudoscience and dogma of creationism. And it's thanks to people like Dr. Alex Ritchie that creationism and the creationist movement here in Australia has largely been consigned to the bad ideas bin of history. 20 or so years ago, the Australian skeptics were involved in many battles against creationism, but it has simply, over the decades, withered and almost died. It was simply a bad idea whose time had come. I remember one dinner talk for the Australian Skeptics, which involved Dr. Alex Ritchie talking about the age of the Earth. To try to put it into some context, he had a long piece of string, and on one end of the string he pegged little dinosaurs, little cardboard cutouts of dinosaurs, and then he continued to unravel the string, which went on and on and on and on and wrapped around the room and back and forth and finally came to the modern era. And it was a very interesting way for the audience to try to grasp the lengths of time involved when we talk about the age of dinosaurs. Vale, Dr Alex Ritchie, a great bloke and a champion of science.
Richard, how do I get better at telling if people are lying?
It's really simple. What you need to do...
Are ghosts real?
Well, actually, funny you should ask that, because what I've
How do
discovered...
I improve my memory?
I've got this great trick.
Can you make me happier?
Okay, look. For answers to 1,000 questions about the incredible world of human behaviour and the psychology of everyday life, join me, psychologist Richard Wiseman,
And me, science journalist Marnie Chesterton.
on Richard Wiseman's On Your Mind, a new podcast from Podimo and Telltale.
Can I win the lottery?
Probably not.
Hi everyone, I'm Fraser Cain, I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and I have gathered together two of my favorite members of the skeptic community, Brian Dunning, Richard Saunders. They're right here.
Hi.
And I have been thinking a lot about the role skepticism plays, scientific knowledge, scientific literacy. How can we navigate and help other people navigate this world today? And so I wanted to just ask them a bunch of questions, free-form thoughts about this. Maybe a little controversial, but I think the modern skeptical movement is seen as a bad thing. Like back in the day when it was James Randi, he was this adorable old man who, defiantly dared people to prove their paranormal experiences, and they all failed, and he kept his money. And there was and we all got inspired by that, and then started to have these uncomfortable conversations that were kind of self-defeating. But I think that skepticism now has a kind of negative connotation. And partly I think it's because the term's been co-opted by other groups.
Yeah, it's a terrible word.
Terrible word.
If I say I'm a skeptic, people go, oh, you're the people who believe that 9/11 was an inside job. Or you're the people who believe
You're a
global warming.
skeptic.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. Vaccine skeptic.
And the misbehavior of prominent skeptics. Nobody in this room, of course.
Well, like what?
Well, I think people, there's a lot of skeptics, and I don't want to name names because I just don't feel like it's productive, right? But I think that it has gotten sucked into other movements.
Yes.
That are misogynistic, that are, anti-trans. Like there's a lot of
but I think you got to draw a distinction. I mean, people can have more than one interest because someone may have gone down one of those roads. Doesn't say anything about scientific skepticism.
No, but I think it pollutes the perception of skeptics from, I think for a little while there, people appreciated skeptics being around. And maybe you guys don't experience that, but I think for a little while there, maybe
I haven't been.
Maybe I'm living in a bubble, but I think for a while there, or maybe it was just the skeptic movement itself was.
Well, that's why in Australia, I try desperately to keep our focus where it should be.
Right.
Yeah. You start straying into these other things. People say to me, for example, why don't you skeptics take on atheism? Why aren't you and I say, well, it's another issue, and there are other people out there more qualified than I.
Why don't you be more atheist?
Yeah, why are we running around in front of churches saying God is not real? I say, that's for other people. They're better qualified than me. My interest is this.
Right.
And sometimes people get very upset when me as a skeptic or we as skeptics don't go and follow what they consider is important.
Right.
It's really interesting.
Right. But there's an endless number of people that are willing to step into those battle, take on QAnon, take on all kinds of truth claims. And that's the heart of it, right? It's just a truth claim. Someone makes a truth claim, and then you say, how do you know? And then they present how they know, and then you have to decide whether you find the evidence.
And I don't like to stray too far out of what I consider my area of expertise is. I have a particular expertise in analyzing psychic goings on, for example, and that sort of stuff. And then I say, well, okay, at a certain point, there are other people more qualified to talk about the Catholic Church and the God problem or whatever.
But do you think, is it because it's too difficult and too emotionally taxing to do, or because there's important work to be done?
No, I think it's counterproductive. For example, I would say that if I were to say that I have an expertise, it would be, or a main focus, core competence, however you want to put it, it would be the truth behind urban legends. Pick an urban legend. Yeah. I want to find out what really happened, if anything, because often it was nothing. And then the interesting question becomes, well, how did the belief arise and everything? So if you say, picking something at random, but Mothman isn't real, okay? Now there's an interesting story behind how the Mothman legend came to be, why people think it's real, there's a lot of really interesting sociology and history there. That's the important lesson right there. Me going and standing in a street corner with a sign that says Mothman isn't real, that is completely unproductive because it doesn't teach any of those lessons.
Yeah.
Not a single one. It just makes me look like a big jerk.
Yeah. But do you think...
Which is easy to do.
Yeah, you don't need any help with that. It's easy.
So, but, we're in this modern age of the internet, and anybody can say anything on the internet. Anybody, we're seeing a lot of stuff that is nonsense, and now it's kind of being fueled by artificial intelligence. People are able to generate nonsense at industrial scales. Are we prepared? Is society prepared to deal with this with the current tools that they have, sort of, psychologically?
I'm not worried about that. This is a question that we get a lot. It's always some form of, hey, the internet makes it so much easier for bad information to propagate. Does that make, are we going to have a bigger problem with more people believing weird stuff? And the answer that I always give, and which I still believe, is that it's like a rising tide that raises all boats equally.
This is how you get Mick West's.
Yeah.
Right.
So Mick West can provide the information that he provides much more effectively now that the internet exists and YouTube and everything. So just as you can provide fake information over the internet, you can also provide good information over the internet. And at the end of the day, it comes down to who is a better communicator and who is putting together the best presentation. We do the best that we can do.
Yeah.
And the people selling crap are also doing the best that they can do.
But you also have reality on your side.
Well, this helps.
Yeah, okay. I don't think that helps.
I mean, if people were saying you could jump up buildings and flap your arms, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
It would sell many.
I had this exact conversation. We were on a panel at TAM Australia, whenever that was.
That was
2012.
That was 12 years
So
ago.
I was on the panel, and Randy was sitting right next to me, and we had that exact conversation. Does the internet make it easier or harder for information or bad information? And I just gave the answer I gave. I don't think it makes any difference. Randy, sitting right here, goes, but we're right! And he bangs his hand on the table. And the crowd goes, yay! Yeah. And I'm sorry, that is not a factor.
Right.
Because that is not the basis on which people decide what to believe. When they hear a claim, they don't go look up research papers to see what's true. They just accept anecdotally what they're preconditioned to accept.
Sure, but like the cake behind the cabbage, the cake is really there, and I just need to update my notions, my preconceptions about whether or not it's there or not, right? And so, like, when it comes to each one of these things, if you are going to test a person's device, if you are going to examine the chupacabra, you're going to come to a conclusion, but reality has got your back.
I see your point.
Mm-hmm.
I do see your point.
And I think that's, and that constrains the nonsense to the periphery of what is credible.
And another interesting thing about modern skepticism, and I'm becoming to realize this more and more, because it's going on year after year after year after decade after decade after decade. We have a wealth of experiences and examples now to point to. When we come across any claim or people come to us, we can now go back and cite many instances that support our point of view rather than the other point of view. What was that Somebody said, is it in your movie that every case of a UFO that's been...
In every UFO that's ever been identified, not one of them has ever been an extraordinary craft.
Right. Or in my point of view,
flying saucer.
Every mystery that has ever been solved
has been something
has not one time ever been the answer has been paranormal, supernatural.
We've never found any ghosts.
Yeah, of course. And if we did find a chunk of metal from an alien spacecraft, it was clearly not of human origin. Then everything would be different.
Yeah,
like it would be like. The outcome would be the exact opposite of the world we're living in right now, which is that the evidence would be obvious. We know we're there, that it's there, and then we would be considering the consequences. Same thing with ghosts. Like, what does it mean to know that I'm going to come back as a ghost and haunt my family? How do I prevent that? How do I manage this? How do I think about this, right?
Yeah.
So all of these, because they have such serious outcomes, if they were true, you'd want good evidence.
Next week in part 5 and the final in this series, Brian, Richard and Fraser discuss the future of artificial intelligence, robots, and what projects Brian and Richard are looking forward to doing next. Hallo an alle Zuhörer aus Deutschland und natürlich alle Zuhörer aus aller Welt, die Deutsch sprechen. Obwohl dieser Podcast Englisch ist, hoffe ich, dass ihr trotzdem Freude daran habt, die Interviews und Meldungen anzuhören. Ihr könnt mehr über diesen Podcast auf www.skepticzone.tv erfahren.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance. Ah, yes, it's Christmas Skeptics in the pub. A lot of rumpy pum-pum, which is just showboating, really. It's the rinky-ding-ding and the hoo-hoo-hoo. I'm looking for tonight at Skeptics in the pub here at the Occidental Hotel. We've got overseas guests, we've got local guests. Unfortunately, Richard Saunders is here, but that won't deter anybody from trying to have a good night anyway. Well, Richard sent me out among everybody to ask everybody, have you ever seen a UFO? And, there's no wrong answer, not really any right answer, really. But, it's Stephen Bavaro here. You're a recent speaker at the convention. Have you ever seen a UFO?
Not that I can remember, no. I see a lot of planes in the sky, but to me, they look like planes. There's nothing mysterious. So I would not class them as an unidentified flying object, or what do we say now? Unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yeah, UAP. I think when I was a kid, I remember looking up and seeing this odd black thing in the sky and being really shocked, not knowing what it was. And then as it came closer, I recognised it as a light plane. But before I realised what it was a weird black shape. And I should have been, I guess it was just a case of you didn't know what really to look for until you saw it, one of those things. But then again, maybe it had its cloaking off momentarily there.
Yeah.
Well, look, now who have we got here this evening?
Hi, I'm Anthony Trecek-King.
And where are you from?
From Boston.
Oh, cool. A lot of fighting goes on there. A lot of baseball. That's
lot of
Celtics. That's all I know. That's the end of my Boston stuff.
But you have to know it's Celtics there. I know it should be Celtics, but we say Celtics.
No, well, yes, if it's your team, you can call it anything you like.
That's right.
And is it really a rough and tough town?
It's a town that you have to be pretty firm and strong to be in a town. Driving is aggressive. Walking is aggressive.
Wow.
Talking is aggressive.
So how does it shape up against Chicago, for example?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually,
a lot more shootings in Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have that issue as much in Boston. Yeah, exactly.
I said good day, sir. You say very firmly to people.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, look, have you ever seen any UFOs around the Boston area?
No, I haven't. Sorry.
Okay, there's not even a flight path. You could get confused with a jumbo jet or something? Or?
No, I was an Air Force brat, so I grew up around a flight line, so I know what a plane looks like, and being on Air Force bases in the middle of nowhere. So this is,
You've seen your fair share of unusual stuff.
I've seen my fair share of unusual stuff.
Not even the occasional U.S. Air Force Black Triangle or something flying around?
No, but the B-2 bombers, they flew through where I lived when I was a kid, and so got to see those up close and personal. So no, so nothing triangle shaped that I couldn't identify.
Wow, that must have been a sight back in the day. They were really new.
Actually, it was. It was really cool. So I was at Grand Forks Air Force Base. That was the home of the B-1B bombers, or B-52s first, and then you had the B-1Bs, and then the B-2s came through. And so to see the progression when I was growing up was pretty cool.
Wow, and how come you're here in Australia at the moment?
I'm here with my partner and wife, Melanie, Tracy King, who will be speaking, who has been speaking across this great country of yours.
Yeah, and how's it been going over? Unfortunately, I wasn't in Melbourne. What was the Melbourne conference like?
Oh, it's great. I think everything is going over wonderful. First of all, the people here are fantastic, very welcoming, and I've just absolutely enjoyed meeting people and seeing what happens here.
Oh, particularly when you get like a skeptic from the US come that maybe not as many people know as the other ones. They're very thinking is power. Okay, tell us about it. We want to have a listen.
Yeah. And everybody's been receptive to her message, and she's smart. Very smart.
Look, I knew as soon as I saw, this is going to be an easy interview. Just with yourself. Like I said, Americans, you're not shy.
I have to go now.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too.
So that's a no from you on that one.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. I wish I did. I really do. I want to see it. I mean, I certainly, the probability of there being extraterrestrial life out there is pretty high, I think. But have I seen one? Has it come here? No.
Because of your background, you know what you're looking at, so your chances of seeing something you don't know is a lot less.
That's correct. That's correct. Absolutely.
Have a good night.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it later.
Thank you. Well, look, have you ever seen a UFO?
In terms of unidentified flying object, yeah, probably. I've probably seen things that I couldn't identify.
Right.
Do I think that they're aliens? No.
Okay. You just gone, I don't know what that is, and moved on.
Yeah, but I mean, it could have been.
Could have been.
I don't know. It was unidentified.
That's true.
And the title.
What do you think of the UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, instead of unidentified flying object?
Well, as far as I'm aware, it's exactly the same thing. They're just, I think there's been so much... I think they've realised that UFOs are sort of a little bit of a joke. So they've just changed the wording to make it sound a little bit more sciencey.
Look, we're here with Tim, who's about to go into his drinking phase at the bar here. We've been asking people, have you ever seen a UFO? Have you ever seen one?
I'd rather not say.
Yep.
I'd rather not say. I did see a meteorite up close.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did it look the way you thought it would?
Well, I didn't. All I saw was the light.
Oh, right.
And they went whoosh across the road, high, but and all our shadows. We were kids walking along a country road.
Wow.
And suddenly went across, and all our shadows sort of shifted around.
At night?
At night, yes. So, and it made... I thought I heard a funny noise, but I don't think it was a UFO.
Oh, okay. No. Okay, a meteor coming toward... I guess it's only a meteorite once it hits the ground, isn't it?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. I don't think this one hit the ground.
Yeah, like I said, yeah. Look, I mentioned my experience earlier there.
Have you seen a UFO?
Look, when I just mentioned earlier, I thought I'd saw something black in the sky, and it turned out to be a light plane. But I was staring at it for a long time until I realised it was a light plane. So I'm just wondering what my brain was making of it. Before I realised it was a light plane, was it not expecting something to be there, so didn't know what to make of it? Is that a thing?
Was that at night? At night?
No, it was during the afternoon. It was daylight.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was a distance thing. See,
distance thing. Yeah, well, the people's... As I've been finding out lately, doing a lot of reading about UFOs, because, as you know, Ross Coulthard has been writing a lot of articles about UFOs and interviews and things, won our Ben Spoon Award. But the ability of people to misinterpret is common, really common, and people don't like it, because they always say that's undermining their ability to be rational. Right? But, I mean, it's so common that it's sort of... You almost can't say it to people, because it is sort of demeaning to them.
But if it is difficult to get scale of something, it is difficult if it's something you're not used to seeing. But people don't want to accept that, do they?
No, scale and distance are amazing issues, especially at night, but even during the daytime. People say, oh, it was so close, it was 200 metres away, it actually turns out to be 20 miles away. And there are cases of that happening all the time. For qualified people make the same mistakes, qualified in quotes, because not many people are actually qualified for UFO sightings, right? But the people who you think would know better, pilots and people like that, make the same mistakes. They think something was up close, but it was actually a long way away. And they've done this by knowing the flight path of whatever it happens to be, and it said it was nowhere near you, but it looked like it was. And therefore, those sort of mistakes, whether it's a light plane or whether it's a meteor or whether it's a cloud or a planet or whatever, or a flight of pelicans, which was supposed to be the Mount Rainier UFO by Mr. Arnold.
Look, I want to point people towards one of my favourite source of sightings. It's a one-on-one one. It's probably a bit more of a close encounter of the third kind, really, where it's Eagle Creek, 1963. It's up on YouTube because the local press talked to the guy. He seems like a regular guy. He doesn't seem like he's bunging it on, but a UFO landed in his backyard, and he gave them some water, and they gave him some pancakes that they were making. And they sent the pancakes away to get analysed, and lo and behold, they found out they were pancakes.
Isn't it amazing how the recipe for pancakes extends throughout the universe?
Although he said their pancakes didn't taste very good, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I'm just wondering, did he have a fevered dream? Was he dreaming? Because he wasn't known as a prankster. This is always what I find interesting. There's a genuine person from the town who's not known as a prankster, who suddenly comes up with a weird, incredible story.
Yeah, I know. I think most people who see UFOs are not pranksters. There are some who obviously are, and some of the pranks are pretty obvious. Some of the classic photographs that a lot of UFO proponents sort of claim this is a wonderful thing, this is definitive proof. You look at them and think, that's bloody obvious. It's not, right? It's a fake. But, I mean, yeah, most people are quite genuine. But the reality is that people see these sort of things all the time. They just don't know what they are. They are, which is why they are actually unidentified. Funny enough, I don't like the term UAP, which it used to be, from unidentified flying object, which sounds like it's flying under control, an object, a thing, to unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Well, I do like the term phenomenon more because it could describe something that's going on with the person themselves. Yeah, well, that would be a phenomenon they're experiencing. It's not a real thing in the sky.
I think you're saying it can be more amorphous, not a thing, not an object. Yeah. But that's now been changed to unidentified anomalous phenomenon, which could be Bigfoot.
Right.
And it drags in everything in there, and I think it's just it's part of this unified theory of woo. You know, they're trying to pull everything together under one topic.
Well, fair enough then. Look, thanks, Tim, and hopefully you will see something in the future that will amaze you.
Really looking forward to it.
Yes, you're just jaded, but I hope one day they'll end.
Thank you.
Well, I've been asking everybody if they've seen a UFO or not. Have you ever seen a UFO?
I have seen a UFO, knowing that UFO means unidentified flying object. Mm-hmm. Well, I was in holiday in Thailand with my partner, and we'd go to dinner every night, and at the same time every night there was something in the sky, a moving light. And my partner, I think, quite rightly pointed out that it was a UFO because it was an unidentified flying object. But we didn't think it was an alien.
Right. Did you do an investigation? It sounds like it might have been a regular plane flight.
Yes, or a satellite maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. But so that's as far as your UFO experience has gone?
Absolutely. Not very spooky, not very exciting. No little green men.
This is Susan Gerbic from Psychics Explained. That's the YouTube channel where we discuss and analyze in great depth all those people who say that they can speak to the dead, all those readings, how they look like they're actually communicating with people. Why do people fall for this? There's a reason. It's much more complicated than you would think. Come to my channel, watch our videos. We would love to have you become part of our conversation. Just visit us on YouTube at Psychics Explained or Psychic Sex Planed on YouTube.
I'm in Sydney, Australia, with the legendary Richard Saunders.
Hello, thank you very much. Legendary.
Richard, could you please tell my audience who you are and what it is that you do and why you're such a legend?
Oh, well, I'm a podcaster. I do a skeptical podcast every week for over 16 years called The Skeptic Zone. I'm an author. I've written many books with children on the art of origami. Yes. I'm an amateur magician. I'm a part-time actor. I've been in movies such as Superman Returns, one of the Thor movies, many, many TV shows.
Wait a minute. Did you meet... You met Thor?
No.
Oh, he is Thor.
No, but I have met various very famous movie stars along the way.
Okay. Well, Thor's on my list, so...
Oh, I'll have a word to him. I'll see what I can do. Okay. And I'm a skeptical investigator for the Australian Skeptics, the chief investigator, so I do many investigations into the paranormal, the supernatural, bizarre claims, consumer affairs, that sort of stuff.
Okay, now I'm in Sydney because I have been speaking in Australia with the Australian Skeptics.
Yes.
Of which you are
I'm the chief investigator, yeah, for the organisation.
Oh.
So I get to investigate ghosts and UFOs and monsters and psychics and all that sort of stuff.
And what have you found?
Nothing.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Nothing yet.
Oh.
We remain hopeful.
Oh, have you seen Kenny Biddle's t-shirt that I designed for him?
Probably. You have to remind me.
It's the I hope it's a ghost this time.
I want one. That sounds good.
Always optimistic.
I've been to places they say Australia's most haunted house.
Oh.
But there apparently are quite a few Australia's most haunted houses. I mean, if you look up in the United States, if you type in America's most haunted house, you'll probably find about 20.
Kenny and I stayed at one of New York's most haunted houses.
Maybe the ghosts go from one to the other, depending on the day of the week.
And I think the skeptics must scare them off.
I've heard that.
That must be what happens.
Yeah, I walk in, they fly away. Anyway, that's what I do.
And the Skeptic Zone, by the way, if you don't listen to the Skeptic Zone, you actually should. How many episodes are you on now?
As we sit here, I'm up to 792.
So start listening. You haven't yet.
It'll take you a long time to catch up.
Now, one of the things that you've mentioned is that you do origami.
Yes.
And I think that's really fascinating, and I think you might need to tell me what that is and what it is that you do.
Well, origami is the art of paper folding. Traditionally, it's thought of as a Japanese art of paper folding, but it really is worldwide. Nobody really knows where it started. The Japanese developed it, but it's huge in countries in South America. It's very popular throughout Asia. Britain has a big origami community. And I've been doing it this year. This is my 50th year of origami. And when I was in my 20s, I wrote lots of books about origami. I've done DVDs. But for me, one of the best things I've ever done in origami is I invented a flying pig.
A flying pig?
And it's just flying in right now. So there's the flying pig. Look at that.
What sound does a flying pig make?
That's a mystery. Now, a very dear friend of mine who died a few years ago was a man called James the Amazing Randi, who was a magician, escape artist, but he was a skeptical investigator. And he traveled the world looking at mysteries and often finding rational explanations for them. And many years ago, in 2007, we were together and he said to me, he knew about the origami I did, he said, could I please invent a flying pig? Because the flying pig was the logo of the James Randi Educational Foundation. And I thought about it for a while, and I went home, and about a week later, after many attempts, I actually made the flying pig, which is a very cute little pig.
It's adorable.
And all those years ago, I did a YouTube video on how to make it, and that's still there. If you look up Pegasus, not Pegasus, but Pegasus Flying Pig Origami, you'll find it. Or if you go to skepticzone.tv, the website, scroll to the bottom, you can see the video and download the instructions. So it's a wonderful intersection between my skeptical work and my love of the art of origami.
And James Randi.
And James Randi, who we all miss very much. He was a wonderful man.
I'm so new to this community, I never got a chance to meet him.
That's a pity. He was funny, he was entertaining, and he was very dedicated to increasing thinking, rational thought, investigation. His enemies loved to paint him as some mean old guy who didn't believe anything, but he was funny, he was very good company, And yeah, we all miss him.
On Sabbath is adorable. I love watching him on TV. One of my favorite TED Talks is him with, didn't he down a bottle of homeopathic sleeping pills?
Yeah. He inspired me and many others to do the same sort of talk, where we get lots of homeopathic sleeping pills, and because they're as good as sugar.
So what are some of the bigger projects that the Australian Skeptics have worked on?
Well, over the years, the Australian Skeptics have done many interesting things, but I think one of the biggest projects took 12 years to complete. And this was a study of 20 years worth, or 21 years worth of psychic predictions. And we call it the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. And we collected nearly 4,000 published psychic predictions about the future, and we analysed each one.
And who did you find was a psychic?
Maybe next year we'll find someone who's a psychic.
Always optimistic.
Always optimistic. Collectively, the psychics scored roughly 11% of their predictions came true, which means that close to 90 either were wrong or too vague or expected. Honestly, somebody made one of their predictions that there would be earthquakes in California. Imagine that. And that was a great endeavour to do that, because we had an international team with people like Susan Gerbic, the famous skeptic from America, on Zoom. For a year we would meet week after week and mark thousands of psychic predictions. Gave us all a wonderful insight into this.
Wow, what a service, actually, just in general, to analyze the efficacy, what would you call it? The accuracy?
Accuracy, I guess that's it, yeah.
Of psychics?
Because we were very interested to see whether people can see the future.
It'll be awesome.
It's no good for skeptics to say, oh, we don't think they can do it. Well, now we've got the data to back up our point of view to saying, we still don't think they can do it, and here's the data to back it up.
Yeah, and that's honestly true skepticism.
I hope so. I think so. And when it was all over, I sort of had a breathed a sigh of relief, because 12 years is a long time to spend on any project.
So is it ongoing or is it over?
It's over, because it was like a 20-year time capsule of predictions. Technically, we could still keep it going, but you know what? We've got so many data points, and I think our conclusions are pretty good, that there's very little point in keeping it going. Our conclusions are, as far as we can see, people really can't see what's coming.
Well, and honestly, if you still think you can see the future, then there's a prize, right?
Yes. We have, in Australia, we have $100,000 for anybody who can demonstrate a paranormal or supernatural power or ability. $100,000.
Well, if I was psychic, I would try to win that. Honestly, I'd win the lottery.
Win the lottery, it's good. It's that's millions of dollars.
Yes. Well, in the United States, it's like $1 billion.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Do I get to keep this?
Well, let me see. Would you like to stay with Melanie? No. Yes.
Thank you, Richard.
ただいま聞いていただいているポッドキャストはオーストラリアから The Skeptic Zone という科学と論理のポッドキャストです。英語は世界中で数ある言葉の一つですが、このポッドキャストはいろいろな国の言葉で紹介します。www.skepticzone.tv を調べて、ホームページの下までにスクロールすると、折り紙のピガサスという翼のある豚を工夫したリチャード・ソーンダスのオリジナルの折り紙のポスターをダウンロードをすることができます。
time once again to head back to those archives at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, as you know full well, or maybe you're new to the show. This is where you can find literally millions of articles online from Australian press, publications and so forth, going back, well, centuries in fact. And as we like to say, if you go there, you never know what you'll find, because you can put in a search and find many references to all sorts of interesting things. This week, in a tribute to Dr. Alex Ritchie, who you heard about earlier on in the show, I typed in Dr. Alex Ritchie. So I found a few things regarding him, and the first one comes from the Canberra Times, dated the 15th of May, 1992. Scientists Attack Creation Advocates by Peter Pockley. The clash between groups of fundamentalist Christians who believe life was formed about 6,000 years ago and scientists who say it evolved over the past 4,500 million years will reach a climax in Sydney tomorrow night. A flying squad of scientists will challenge Dr. Alan Roberts at the final public lecture in his national tour, presenting evidence for the supposed discovery of the remains of Noah's Ark near Mount Ararat in Turkey. And I'll just break in here to say, we used to hear about various claims of people finding Noah's Ark. I haven't heard any recently. Maybe they're still out there looking, I don't know. Dr. Roberts is the Sydney Baptist who says that he was kidnapped by Kurdish rebels and held hostage for 3 weeks in September last year while looking for the remains. Evidence for the Ark is considered crucial to any literal interpretation of the Bible. His lectures have become controversial as a result of the actions of Professor Ian Plimer. And I'll quickly break in to say Ian Plimer in those days was a very strong advocate for science against creationism. He wrote a book called Telling Lies for Gods. More recently, he's become more noted for his, to be blunt, climate change denial stance. However, in the time we're talking about, he was a strong supporter of science against creationism. We read on. Actions of Professor Ian Plimer, head of the School of Earth Sciences in the University of Melbourne. Professor Plimer was ejected by police from Dr. Roberts' meetings in Melbourne and Hobart last month, where he attempted to ask questions. Professor Plimer, who has studied the geology of Turkey for 10 years, and other scientists say that the structure, purported to be the remains of the Ark, is nothing more than a basin-shaped fold of rocks, a common structure known as a syncline. The Canberra Times obtained the names of the flying squad from Dr. Alex Ritchie, paleontologist at the Australian Museum in Sydney, after he delivered a scientific answer to creationism in a seminar at a Sydney hotel. Dr. Ritchie said he is concerned scientists are not taking the challenge from creationists seriously enough, especially the way the anti-evolutionary story is being reinforced in school and university studies. The creationists misrepresent science and misquote scientists, relying on most people being scientifically illiterate, he said in a seminar, with apologies to the late Dr. Alex Ritchie for my appalling imitation of his wonderful Scottish accent. Academic scientists have become so concerned about the prevalence of anti-evolutionary views in universities that the Institute of Biology recently commissioned a study of the attitudes of first-year students of biology. Responses have been received from 4,316 students in 17 universities. Associate Professor John Skidmore of the University of Technology, Sydney, who is coordinating the polls, said, "Final figures will not be ready until June, but it is clear that a substantial proportion of biology students believe the creationist story, that God created man pretty much in his present form at one time in the last 10,000 years. At his lectures and in supporting publications, Dr. Roberts' supporters have been collecting entrance fees and donations to support his work in Turkey. His lectures, sales of videos and fundraising are organised in the name of Noah's Ark Research Project. On April 9, Professor Plimer obtained a certificate from the New South Wales Department of Business and Consumer Affairs registering the business name, Noah's Ark Research Project Services. His solicitor has served notice on the meeting organisers warning them against using this name illegally. Professor Plimer has also referred to the Taxation Department the form seeking donations in the Noah's Ark Research Project newsletter. And a statement by a Mr. Ron Edwards, quote, "We believe membership fees and donations will be tax deductible," end quote. At tomorrow's meeting, members of the Australian Skeptics will distribute a pamphlet quoting passages from the Bible and biblical scholars, including Cardinal Edward Clancy, the Roman Catholic Primate of Australia. The pamphlet concludes, "It is abundantly clear and incontrovertible that there never was a flood and that there never was an ark. In addition, the authors of Genesis changed the landing place of the ark to Mount Ararat, whose whereabouts they knew from Mount Nazir, which may never have existed. The story was adopted by the Genesis authors as a vehicle for religious truth, not historical fact. Searchers for the ark on Mount Ararat are gullible fools or culpably ignorant or worse. Making money from it, probably public fraud." The pamphlet is published in the name of Noah's Ark Project Services, registered business name M6035937. And don't quote me on that last number because the text, the reproduction here in the archives, sometimes can be a little bit blurry, but I don't think it really matters in this case. And again from the Canberra Times, dated the 19th of May, 1992. Ark specialists keep scientists at bay. The presentation of Australian evidence about the supposed remains of Noah's Ark continues to receive a stormy passage. Peter Pockley, a science writer based in Sydney, was the only reporter to gain entry to the latest confrontation. A public lecture on Noah's Ark ended late Saturday night after the lecturer refused to respond to questions from a group of scientists. Security guards ejected one of the group and tried to carry out another, and police were called. Dr Alex Roberts of Sydney gained publicity last year following a field trip to the supposed Ark site in Turkey when he reported having been kidnapped and held captive by Kurdish rebels for 3 weeks. The meeting at Sydney's Wesley Centre. Let me break in here and talk about this for a second. The Wesley Centre is in downtown Sydney. It was originally, if I'm not mistaken, a Methodist thing because my dad was a Methodist minister and then became a Uniting Church minister when the Methodists changed to the Uniting Church in this country, merged with the Presbyterians. And when I was a very small boy, living up in the north coast of New South Wales, far away from Sydney, my dad would travel to Sydney occasionally to attend church conferences, which have a special name which eludes me at the moment. In the Wesley Arcade, there used to be a magic shop called Weirdo's Magic Shop, I think. And on my occasional trips to Sydney as a boy, one of the highlights was visiting this little magic shop. The magic shop has long since gone, decades ago, but I can still walk into that area, that arcade, and stand in front of where it used to be. And lots of memories there. Anyway, let's read on. The meeting at Sydney's Wesley Centre was originally promoted in the name of, quote, Noah's Ark Research Project, end quote, a group backing Dr. Roberts' quest for funds to seek more evidence for the Ark. It rapidly became apparent that the organisers were determined to prevent the controversies which had followed Dr. Roberts' 2 previous lectures in Melbourne and Hobart, which resulted in the ejection by police of a professor of geology who had tried to ask questions of Dr. Roberts. The same professor, Ian Plimer, head of the School of Earth Sciences at the University of Melbourne, turned up at the lecture and was greeted with a writ jointly laid against Melbourne radio station 3AW, alleging defamation of Dr. Roberts after the Melbourne meeting. A news crew from Channel 9 was then refused entry. The chairman of the meeting, Ron Edwards, announced that the organising body had changed its name to, quote, Ark Search, end quote, disassociating it from, quote, Noah's Ark Research Project Services, end quote. As reported in the Canberra Times on Friday, Professor Plimer, who has 10 years' experience in the geology of Turkey and is a member of the 800-strong society Australian Skeptics, had registered the latter name as a business in New South Wales last month, and his solicitor had sent a letter last week advising the ARK fund raisers not to use the name, although none of this information was passed to the audience. After receiving the writ, Professor Plimer said he was determined to defend himself against Dr. Roberts' action and would be supported by many expert witnesses. If the action gets to court, the case could become a major test case in the running skirmishes between scientists and groups of Christian fundamentalists who adhere, literally, to the biblical record that the Earth was formed 6,000 to 10,000 years ago and that all fossils were formed during the Great Flood and that life was created in 5 days. In what can only be described as a quite extraordinary atmosphere for a public lecture on a scientific or academic topic, entrance $4, 5 security guards patrolled the hall constantly. Some guards placed themselves next to Professor Plimer and Dr. Alex Ritchie of the Australian Museum, a paleontologist of 30 years standing and a member of the Skeptics who was apparently known to the organisers. Mr. Edwards made it clear at the start of the meeting that they would take prompt action if there was any interruption. About 30 members of the audience, numbering around 350, appeared to be sceptical of the ARK claims, but kept their silence during most all of Dr. Roberts' presentation of evidence, which depended heavily on slides. After about 1.5 hours, one scientist called out for documentary evidence for Dr. Roberts' claim that radiocarbon dating of archaeological and biological remains could not be relied upon for specimens from the supposed Ark. Dr. Colin Murray-Wallace, a geology lecturer at Newcastle University and an expert in radiocarbon dating, was rapidly approached by a security guard and told to leave. After some argument, he and his wife, an industrial chemist, complied, and Dr. Roberts made the first of several requests that police be called. "The guard tried to grab me. It was quite unpleasant," Dr. Murray-Wallace said yesterday. "I was upset that a lot of important scientific principles were being dismissed without any scientific basis." Dr. Roberts would only accept questions in writing. While answering one on the Great Flood, when the biblical book of Genesis said Noah was supposed to have saved all the animals on earth, Dr. Ritchie asked him to explain the difference between a term geosyncline, I think that's pronounced, a term used by Dr. Roberts in his lecture, and a syncline. Dr. Roberts would not answer Dr. Ritchie, and a security guard asked Dr. Ritchie to leave. When he refused, 3 guards forcefully tried to lift him out. Surrounded by others who protested at his treatment, Dr. Ritchie managed to hang on. Mr. Edwards again said the police had been called. "I suppose I was assaulted, but I preferred to turn the other cheek in a Christianity way," Dr. Ritchie said later. Dr. Plimer challenged Dr. Roberts to a public debate. The challenge went unanswered. The remaining audience heckled the protesters. Mr. Edwards closed the meeting and a 4-strong police squad arrived and cleared the hall. The sergeant in charge said, "There will be no action taken as far as we're concerned." 6 university and museum-based geologists present at the meeting and consulted separately afterwards, said, "On the basis of the Dr. Roberts photographs, the supposed arc structure was nothing more than a common geological structure, found frequently around Mount Ararat in Turkey, known as a syncline." Dr. Roberts repeatedly stressed that he had not concluded that the structure was the ark, but he said, "If it's not the ark, what is it? Let's dig and find out." Dr. Roberts said he was trained as an historian and geographer, not a scientist. The chairman listed his academic qualifications as Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Letters, University of New England, Master of Education, University of Sydney, and Doctor of Christian Education, Freedom University of Florida, USA. His doctoral certificate on display noted that it was awarded to him in 1979 for a thesis on the teaching of absolute Christian values in Australian primary schools. He received a standing ovation from the majority of the audience when the meeting was called off. Well, there's just a couple of references from a very interesting time in Australian scientific history. And as I said before, all these years later, in 2023, we can look back at these times and see how, with the help of people like Dr. Alex Ritchie, creationism has largely disappeared from the landscape and certainly is not a big issue anymore as far as education goes in Australia. However, there will always be people who believe the world is 6,000 years old. Thank you once again to those good people at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, because when you go there, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. Coming up on next week's episode, Maynard interviews Melanie Trecek-King, the final part of the roundtable discussion with Fraser Cain, Brian Dunning and myself, Australian Skeptics newsletter with Adrian Hill. And speaking of Adrian Hill, Adrian will interview Chris Labos, a cardiologist from Canada. And he's written a book, Does Coffee Cause Cancer? And 8 more myths about the food we eat. Sure to be an interesting interview coming up next week on the show. Thank you to all those people who contribute to the Skeptic Zone via PayPal or Patreon. As I've said now for many years, without you, there would be no Skeptic Zone. I could stay in bed. No, I wouldn't. It's too warm. I'd run out and have a swim. No, I would like to do the Skeptic Zone regardless. Thank you. Your contributions mean everything. But for this week, with the temperature still warm, shall we say, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to everybody who listens after the music for the Easter egg, the dice game. Let me see, I've got my box of dice here. Many. I've got a 60-sided, a 20-sided, 6, a 4-sided, what's this, a 10-sided. I'll choose one at random. I'll choose a 4. I don't have a 4-sided dice. Yes, I do. How about that? In fact, I won't choose one at random. I will choose a 4-sided. It's a pyramid shape. All right. So, we guess. I'm going to play along too. Going to roll it 4 times. And you would think, out of 4, with a 4-sided die, that we must get 1 or 2 correct. Here we go. I'm going to guess number 2 for the first roll. Here we go. And it's 3. Not off to a great start. Okay, I'm going to guess, I don't know what you're guessing, but I'm going to guess 1. 1. Here we go. 1. Hey, about time. Well, with a 4-sided die, what do you expect? All right, I'm going to guess 4 this time. 4? I am on a roll. All right, and the last roll of the die, here we go. I'm going to guess a 2. Another 4. Not too bad this week. The winning numbers are 3, 1, 4, and 4.